Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Forecasting AV. My name is Hatem Bitar. I'm the Regional Sales Manager for Middle East, Africa, and Southeast Europe. I'll be your host for today, together with my colleague Zach Voislav, WyreStorm's Product Manager and a guru of AV over IP himself. Our guest for this month is Richard Jonker from Netgear. He's the Vice President of Business Development for the EMEA and APAC regions based in the Netherlands. Welcome, Richard, and thank you for being part of this month's episode.
Thanks for having me, guys. Great to be able to talk with our valued partner WyreStorm about a topic that's so dear to our hearts. So, yeah, looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So, Richard, before we start, can you please share a bit more about yourself and Netgear?
Yeah, I've been with Netgear since 2007, so that's 16 years. I had different roles. So, I started off in sales, Benelux, then emerging markets. I did emerging markets for 4 years and Benelux for 4 years. And then served as vice president product management for our SMB products in California. Total of 6 years, and then the last 2 years I am working in business development. Basically, I have to develop the market for the products that I built a few years ago. So it's not the products, guys. It is absolutely necessary to sell those because they're perfect. Well, what we did find is we're trying to sell IT products in an audio video market. I think that kind of sums up how Netgear got into this. A very warm subject. It's very current because those worlds are converging.
Correct. So that's absolutely true. Let's dive more into that. Let's talk about our new partnership, WireStorm and Netgear. Are you as excited as we are?
Yeah. So I'm one of the driving forces behind it, and always when you come to a partnership, there are a couple of reasons, right? What they always say, you should imagine a few years from now you're writing a press release on how successful it has been,
Yes.
and try to imagine what is in that press release. Well, there's a few things, right? Of course, there's a market fit. We both sell products that have, let's say, there's a budget for those products within the accounts that we target. There is a need. There is an absolute necessity to move from old-fashioned dinosaur technologies to AV over IP for reasons of versatility, also price. There's market demand coming from size that we never guessed would be there. We all got hit with a few years in COVID jail, and now the world has become hybrid, which means you have to transport audio and video signals throughout a building for video conferencing or live streaming, and you have to to understand that people come to the office to collaborate, to work with AV technology instead of sit in a cubicle all day. So I think that's a lot of change that both WireStorm and Netgear were prepared for. We just never thought it would be this much of a demand explosion. So I think that's an important point. The second point is that our people seem to be compatible. We seem to be thinking in a similar way, although many of the WireStorm people have their DNA in the AV industry. I think you guys kind of seem to get that distribution philosophy that we also have. I think that's another important point. So you have the technology, you have the supply chain similarities, and then the people. All those are compatible. All right, that's good, right? And then if you see what problems are you trying to solve as WireStorm in AV over IP, you're trying to hit, well, let's say the 1 gigabit market, the mass market for video conferencing, for digital signage, for numerous more volume-based applications. While on the other hand, you're playing in the 10 gigabit market, which is traditional, for the medical applications, zero latency, highest possible resolutions, highest possible video and color quality, 4K 60, HDR, 4x4x4. So that makes WireStorm a partner for Netgear that's end to end. Now, and then of course there's a technical compatibility where your products are a natural fit for ours. They just work. And then I think we're both doing efforts, and I've seen your software, pretty impressive because we installed it in the office that I work from in the Netherlands. So I've seen it work. And one of the things that we both do is focus on a mix of simplicity and ease of use. So both of our products, whether it's WyreStorm or Netgear, do not look like the cockpit of a Boeing 747 with buttons everywhere, even behind you, where you need three people to fly the thing. No, it's simple, it's essential. I would call it basic. It just has the essential stuff that you need to make these applications work. I think, and then in the final thing, and when we talk about supply chain, I think we also have to touch on the fact that both WireStorm and Netgear made some good choices when the chip shortage hit, and we were able to circumvent for a large part. For us, it was more than 50% that we were able to still supply, while other manufacturers in this space, whether it's switches or endpoints, encoders, decoders, were not able to sell anything for 6 to 9 months, right? So that kind of drove the customers straight into the combination of WireStorm and Netgear. I think that's also important. And I think, yeah, a final piece of compatibility is that we seem to focus on the same geographical regions. So when we met at ISE, there were a lot of people that we could bring to each other's booth because, well, there was an understanding, right? We're both focusing on this region. We're focusing on this indirect distribution model. We seem to like the same kind of value add distributors, right? The same no nonsense approach. I think, yeah, that kind of sums up all the ingredients in a successful press release, right? How this partnership took off.
That's absolutely true. And having the AV over IP solution, the encoders, decoders, controllers, compatible out of the box with the network infrastructure, this was a main advantage, I think, of why we started working together and why AV in general and the IP manufacturers, they are converging more and more. If you notice, a few years ago, the AV people used to be scared of installing audiovisual equipment over the IT network because of obvious reasons. First, the clashes between the AV and the IT people, the non-compatibility of the audiovisual with the network infrastructure, the not enough bandwidth on the network. So there was always a gap existing between the AV and the IT. But more and more we see it converging, and more we see it as a single entity which is supposed to work seamlessly together. And this is also one of the driving forces why we brought WireStorm and Netgear to work together and to be a compatible single unified solution for the customers. Do you think a question from your perspective, from a network manufacturer perspective, do you think you're seeing more customers being confident and to specify and to install AV solutions over the IT networks?
Well, yes and no. Let me challenge this a little bit, because you could say that there are two planets, right? In this solar system, there's a planet IT and there's a planet audio video,
Yeah.
planet AV. And those planets are not merging, right? It's not happening. It is more true that they are learning from each other. They exchange people to visit each other's planet. Great place you have here. It looks interesting, but I don't like it. I want to go back to my own planet because yours basically sucks, right? That's kind of what AV people and IT people say about each other's planet. But they have to learn from each other. Now, what we do observe is video people are able to learn some of the basics of IT because they have to, while IT people do not have to learn the basics of video because they don't have to. And that's a dangerous difference because it means that IT people do not understand what video does on their network, right? Multicast. And sometimes people use a lot of marketing blah blah. I mean, even in the audio world, it happens where they say, well, in the end, we will live in a converged network world and everything will flow seamlessly over the network. In your dreams, it's not happening. Because if you do not configure your network right by separating all those kinds of traffic in proper lanes, just like on a busy highway, for anyone that has ever driven in a city with more than 20 million people, it's hard. If there is no rules, if there is no regulations, if there is no traffic cops, it's going to be a mess. And that's something where IT people say, you know what? I don't want to be that traffic cop. I'm either going to say, no, I don't want video on my network. You guys figure it out yourself. Here's a line with internet access, but I don't want any multicast on my network. Those guys are the ones that keep a sane and working network. If you say, well, I don't know how this all works, but the marketing says the world is going to be a converged network, it's open bar, everybody welcome. Well, you know what happens to parties where everybody is welcome, right? Uninvited guests, they drink all your booze, and in the end, it will be a mess and you have to clean it up. So that is what's happening if you don't regulate AV on an IT network. And that's why IT people, just as much as AV people, need to learn what it means to run AV over IP. Now, as Netgear, we've chosen a position, a very successful position, I can say, a hundreds of millions worth successful position, is that AV traffic should travel over an AV network and kept away from the IT network. Just separate it. Separate the lanes in bicycles, slow traffic, mopeds, and trucks. Transit traffic is not allowed to go over the bicycle path in the village, right? It's something we've learned here in the Netherlands, and it works really well. So if you apply that to AV, it means that you drive down cost by not consolidating traffic over an entire IT network that you then have to upgrade just for a few video nodes. You keep the sanity, you keep the security, also very important, which is an IT specialism and not an AV specialism. So if you do these things right, you make sure the video goes where the video has to go, not somewhere else, and you maintain the reliability and the performance that you need without dealing with multicast storms and broadcast nightmares, because you don't want that. I think that's an important learning now that we are in this AV over IP business since I think 2016 it started, so 7 years now. We've learned that and successfully implemented an automation piece, because the next thing you need to do for AV people is don't make this difficult. Nobody in AV wants to become an IT guru. That's not their dream. They want give the most beautiful AV experience possible, right? AV people are visual people because that's what they sell. They're not interested in command line programming of Cisco switches. Nobody likes that. I mean, there's some dinosaurs in the IT world that still like that, but that's a dying breed. AV people want to do AV as fast as possible, as reliably as possible, and absolutely as impactful as possible. That's where the focus is. So as Netgear, we just help them. And I think you guys at WyreStorm, you figured this out in the similar way, right? Although you use some concepts from the IT world, like software defined networking, that's really what AV over IP is. And the way you program your controllers, well, you make this simple so that people without an IT background can build a beautiful AV over IP installation and not become a Cisco certified network administrator, because that is just not necessary.
Exactly, and I would like to add also that it's amazing how Netgear saw this problem all way before everyone else in the and network world, and how they construct their AV line network switches, and that's why I'm really excited for this partnership because it's going to make our lives much more easier. That's only to us, but to our clients in, as you said, on AV Planet, because now they are for sure they can take out of the box that network switch, put it on the table, connect the endpoints, our WireStorm devices, and they will work out of the box. And that's the beauty of this, and that's why I'm really excited about this and looking forward.
We always compare it with building a large villa, right? You're living in a normal home, you got rich, and now you can design your own villa. Oh, what a stress. I need to design bathrooms, toilets, jacuzzis, saunas, a swimming pool outside. And while I can pick all these beautiful things, these beautiful endpoints, unfortunately, there's a boring truth behind it, and that's you need the water in and the water out, and the heating, all of that needs to work. But that's not something you understand, right? You understand what a beautiful marble shower is with everything, but you don't necessarily know how big the pipe is to go to that place, or the sewer system under it. Now, what do? You call the plumber. Netgear is the plumber. You call us. We handle that for you. We guarantee we'll put the right pipe in for you so that we don't have to break open your beautiful marble floor after the villa is done because, oops, we picked the wrong pipe. We don't do that. We'll just make sure it works, which is for free, right? So we provide free pre-sales and after-sales support. We kept it simple. We don't have support packs, support ticketing systems. We have an email address with real people. It works. proavdesign@netgear.com. The email gets picked up with someone in your region that just works with you and fixes whatever design question you have. So that even with a bill of materials list that they provide, that you will have the right network for this beautiful WyreStorm AV over IP network. Because network HD products, they come in different sizes, different speeds. So you could say, well, I'm building a 1 gig AV over IP network, so all my switches need to be 1 gig, right? Well, yes and no. The 1 gig is per port. So if you have 10 WireStorm Network HD encoders on one switch, you really need to provide a non-blocking 10 gigabit up
Exactly.
to wherever other switch is that has the decoders. And so that involves some math, and we help you with that, resolving that. But just, maybe you're able to do this yourself because it's not that hard, but it's always good to have an extra pair of eyes, an extra pair of ears, listen how you have solved it. Maybe this is a really large building with fiber running from one side to the other side. Screens, speakers are everywhere. My encoders are together, my decoders are spread over the building. How do I do that, right? So we help with questions like that as well, to make you feel, well, you're 100% Planet AV, but maybe also a little bit Planet IT.
Yeah, exactly. And also, the Netgear is making it even easier by providing the different profiles. So now WireStorm is also part of those options. So now the user can just connect the units, select for those ports the WireStorm profile, and they are good to go. I can imagine it's really good that you have that support. So if the clients, if they have some, as you said, some complexity, network, multiple switches, uplinks, they should definitely contact you. But if I say it, if you have one switch, two switch max, you will be set up in no time.
Yeah, we have one job, and it's 3 words: make this easy. That's our job.
Yep.
So if there's anything else we can do, and of course we're tickling your engineers in the background already about that, what if our switch could see a WireStorm Network HD encoder or decoder in the network and automatically configure it without you even touching it? I mean, that's something that we're thinking of. And we've worked with some of the alliances that we're both member of, for example, SDVUE, to make things easy. As you know, SDVOE encoder decoders from many manufacturers kind of work together, but the controllers, that's more a brand specific thing. I think one of the things that we provide is a common infrastructure so that if you do SDVOE, you can work with your favorite brand, WireStorm, of course. If WireStorm doesn't have a certain product in a certain range or a certain specification, we can make it work with another brand. So that's one of the advantages. Also of the SDVOE alliances, who have more than 60 manufacturers working together now on making, I think it's almost 1,000 products that are compatible. I mean, that's something new, right? We always said, well, AV over IP has no standards. Everyone has their own standard. Well, I think WireStorm and Netgear have proven that that's not completely true. There is some form of standardization. And if you say standardization is making this easy, is automating, well, yes, you can do an SDVOE installation using WireStorm's SDVOE products, plug them into a network switch from Netgear for that particular application. So a 10 gigabit M4300 switch works outside immediately, right? You unpack, you power it up, boom, done. It works.
Yeah.
So that plug and play thing, I think that's an important aspect, because if there's one thing that our integrators are allergic for is doing a truck roll because it doesn't immediately work and they have to send a guy into the site the next day to fix something. Yeah, well, we're here, right, to make it easy, to make sure that never happens. So you can have your turnaround time as fast as possible, which I think with the products that Netgear and WyreStorm have brought to market, we are in the lead. I don't think anyone else does it easier than what we do currently at this moment.
Correct. Now, you just mentioned something about the M4300, and I wanted to just to for people who don't know. So, Wirestorm manufactures three lineups of NHD system, which is the AV over IP system, the NHD 400, the NHD 100 series, and 400, 500 series, and the 600 series, which is the 1080p over 1 gig, 4K over 1 gig, and 4K over 10 gig network. So,
Mhm.
I know that Netgear has the switches, all the infrastructure to cater for all those technologies. But can you walk us through lineups that you have for to cater only for the AV over IP?
Yeah, so you could see that as Lego, right? These are building blocks to build your own farm, castle, or whatever you're trying to build,
Yeah.
which really depends on two things. What is the speed of every encoder or decoder you're trying to connect? And as you mentioned, with 4K or 1K over 1 gig, you need 1 gigabit ports on the LAN side. But then the number of ports decides how much total bandwidth you need on that network. Because the rule is any encoder in the network can transmit to any receiver in the network. And if it goes from one encoder to a number of receivers, that's called multicast, right? If
Yes.
it's one to one, we call that unicast. If it's one to everything, that's called broadcast. You don't want that. That's going to be a mess. Multicast is the way to go. So you pick and choose where the traffic goes. Now, then you design the network in such a way that all the traffic from the encoders can flow to all the decoders without compromising, right? That means enough bandwidth so that it's what we call non-blocking. Now, that kind of tells you what kind of switch to pick, number of ports times 1 gig, total bandwidth, number of switches, depending on are these endpoints all together. For example, you're doing a large video conferencing boardroom with 8 displays. They're grouped maybe by two, to do Microsoft Teams in this 21 by 9 front row thing. Everyone wants that now. That means you are doing 4 encoders and 8 decoders. Well, you could do those on one switch if it's all close together. But if it's not close together, it's 2 switches. And then you have to decide, okay, how do I bring that bandwidth from one switch to the other?
Exactly.
Am I using copper wires? Am I using fiber? So we help you out with those kind of choices. So you could say it is a bandwidth driven decision. That's number one. Number two is distance. Where are these switches located? And do I use copper or fiber? So you choose media. Now, if it's about large installations, then you have to choose is this network capable of handling so many connections? We've done AV over IP networks with thousands of decoders and encoders. Well, it gets messy, right? So you have to choose maybe to do a double or a 3 layer network, maybe with 100 gig or 400 gig. And we've often seen networks where there's 100 gig switches on top, and then on the edge, there's 1 gig switches. Well, you could say that 100 gig port can handle 100 NHD 100 or 400 models, right?
True.
That's a lot. If you then see, okay, we can stack bunch of these 100 gig switches together, you can imagine you can get to thousands of endpoints, but you need to be careful what you do. One thing you may want in such a large installation is redundancy. So if one of the switches fails for whatever reason, or there's a power failure, the other switch takes over, which is then under another power distribution function. So those kind of decisions need to be taken as well. And then, well, yeah, it's not just video. Maybe you want to do audio. Maybe you want to de-embed Dante audio, or if you're in the broadcast side of the house, you want to do AES 67. That requires more ports. So you have to think about that. So those kind of decisions, media, bandwidth, protocols, redundancy, that kind of drives that decision.
100%. And this is something that your design team on the email that you will be sharing with us, they do those design help for the
Yeah, it's the best kept secret in the industry. I think these guys have done tens of thousands of designs by now. We're busy already for a few years. So very experienced team of network engineers. All of them have individually more than 10 years experience working as a systems engineer on very specific networking related questions. They understand video over IP, audio over IP. They deeply understand networking as well as the way our switches are constructed. So they know all of that, and they are there to help you for free.
Yeah.
And all you have to do if you want to contact them is email proavdesign@netgear.com, and you get your question answered. If it's a simple question, if they need more information, they'll either ask you, maybe provide the logs of an existing switch that is acting up, or we'll schedule Teams or a Zoom with you, depending on the time of day and your question. And if necessary, we'll have several specialists available to really tackle any issue. So
Okay.
far, our track record is 100%. We have been able to resolve any issue that's been handed to us so far. So we're pretty proud of that. It is definitely the number one reason why integrators, when they try out Netgear, they stick with Netgear.
Very good. I just wanted to add something is that the different lineups of Netgear switches not only caters for the different bandwidth within the switch itself, but also it has different bandwidths for the uplinks for connecting several switches together, whether be it on fiber connection between the switches or on the copper switches. So this is also important for scaling up the AV over IP solutions over different sites or different buildings, different layers of connectivity between the encoders and decoders.
Yeah, we actually automated that. So if you have two of these Netgear switches with a WyreStorm setup, and you can connect them. For example, you use one Ethernet cable over 1 gig, then you have a 1 gig connection. Now, in networking, the way it works is if you connect a second cable, you still have a 1 gig connection, and then you have another one, right? It's not 2 gigabit. It's only 2 gigabit if the switch on one side and the switch on the other side understand that that is what you want to do, which is called link aggregation, which is all hard because you have to program that by hand. Not anymore because we've automated that. We call that auto lag, auto link aggregation. If you connect two of these Netgear AV switches together and you use two cables, it automatically understands, you want double the bandwidth. So even if you use four cables, even if you use 4 times 10 gigabit cable, it will understand that and always give you the maximum interconnect between those two switches, which is really important if you have encoders and decoders spread over two different switches.
Yeah. Now I know that Netgear is definitely more enthusiastic about AV integrators using AV over IP technology since you guys manufacture an infrastructure for that. But just a general question in the industry: do you see more and more people diverting from using the traditional AV distribution like on HDMI and HD based T and going more towards AV over IP technology in their designs and installations?
Yeah, we do see that. It is for a couple of reasons. I think the AV over IP technology has matured. It is better available than some of the ancient technology that's being built on old, higher nanometer chips. So these chips are not available. While the latest and the greatest, which is the latest in AV over IP, is on more modern chips, and that's typically available. That's one reason. The other reason is that many of the video applications are not analog or digital anymore. They are IP based, like
Yeah.
video conferencing or this podcast that we're doing right here is an IP cloud based application. So why would you use an ancient technology like HD based T to do that, right? It's way more logical to do this fully over IP. I think you see that. And then you see that more and more of these applications also include things like IoT, cloud management, software defined infrastructure with controllers, software. All of that is IP based. So it's kind of a natural transition. So I think you could say that AV over IP will overtake all of that, right? And now that prices are coming down with the latest generations of ASICs, yeah, I think that will accelerate definitely.
So last thing I want to talk about is that we have a commitment to security document, which is our security features on the NHD system, which is something very important, I'm sure, to the customers and to the specifiers who are specifying the NHD system, which is the AV over IP. So can you talk us about what security protocols does Netgear implement in their AV switchers?
Yeah, unlike the standard AV protocols, we don't disclose a lot about security. You don't want to tip off the hackers here. But what you could say is there's some network basics that you need to respect when you're designing any network. And the same that goes for a normal IP network is also valid for an AV over IP network. The difference is the AV piece is done by AV people that don't know all the intricacies of an IT security thing. It's just if you follow those design practices, for example, segmenting networks, segmenting protocols into VLANs, using the right levels of authentication, making sure that all the endpoints properly authenticate. I mean, there's a few things here that are basics that everyone should understand. I think there are some things that we do not publish because, well, for obvious reasons. Um, it is probably good to say that a general piece of advice for anyone building an AV over IP network is get trained on those basics. Make sure you do not just understand AV over IP fundamentals and design network protocols and how that all works, but also how to design for security. There's a couple of things I think is important. We do want everyone to enjoy the video, but we don't want Vladimir Putin to hack into our network, right? That's kind of where it stops.
So, what do you think the future would bring for the AV infrastructure? Do you see more and more AV depending on the network? So, you guys will be an a force to reckon with in the AV industry.
Yeah, what we see is, of course, audio moved massively to AV over IP, right? Audio, and mainly Dante in the commercial space. I mean, Dante probably has more than 90% market share in commercial audio over IP. So you could say, well, it's not a standard, but de facto, that's a standard. In video, you can roughly say, and I like the fact that WyreStorm is really playing in all these areas. It's standard 1K 1080p over 1 gig. That is a given, right? That's a basis that you need to have, and
Yeah.
every commercially available display can handle that, right? I think 720p, that's over. That's yesterday's news. Now, 1080p over 1 gig, a very logical next step would be to do 4K over 1 gig. And you guys can do that. We see many manufacturers that either they do 4K 30 or 4K 60 compressed over 1 gig. That's a logical evolution what you can do over the same switches. Now, a next step would be to do 4K 60, HDR, 4 by 4 by 4 over 10 gigabit. That's the top of the line what WireStorm has to offer with their SDVoE technology. And you could say that, well, you do need to upgrade both encoder decoders, displays, as well as the switches if you want to do that. So it's a little bit more costly. But how much more does it really cost? Well, I speak on behalf of the switch manufacturer here. We're about twice the price. If you say a 1 gig switch is like 40, 45 euros per Ethernet port, a 10 gigabit switch is like 80, 90 euros per Ethernet port. So it's not that much more expensive, particularly because a switch is only a small part of an AV over IP network. uh, you could say it's worth the investment because if there's one thing that we learned during COVID is you don't want to look at a grainy picture of your colleagues and customers all days anymore. You deserve the best, particularly if you're working together with colleagues in an office only maybe 1 or 2 days a week. You do deserve the highest possible audio and video quality. And I think higher resolution is an immediate, easy to interpret feature of quality. The same with frame rate, the same with no artifacts or limited compression. So I think seeing the network go to 10 gig, probably logical, especially because we don't know exactly what the future brings. But one thing that the future will bring is probably higher resolutions with higher, more intelligent compression rates, like now with H.265 versus H.264, right? It's more intelligent. And yeah, I think we will all enjoy that. I don't know when Netflix will start to stream their movies in 8K. I mean, that's far away probably, but at some point in time, the world will go there and we will go there with them, and the network will be ready for that.
That's true. That's true. That's true. Let's not also forget the scalability of having AV over the network, where you, for example, it's going to be really costly to add a single input or a single output on a maxed out AV switcher, whereas you just in the AV over IP, you just add an additional encoder or additional decoder, or just upgrade the switch, which is much easier to do the installation and the cabling and the patching rather than upgrading a whole AV switcher.
We had that actually in one of our offices where we put a rack with a switch full of network HD or 1 gig encoder decoders to do a video wall in our presentation and training room. And then we said, why are we running an HDMI cable there from a laptop for presenting? I mean, come on, practice what you preach. So we want to replace that with a network encoder
Yeah,
that we place next to the laptop. And then with a very short HDMI cable, we just plug in that encoder. It doesn't mean we have to change the entire network. The only thing we have to do is plug one encoder into an existing switch. Now, if you run out of Ethernet ports, because you do audio as well, and maybe a proximity sensor, for IoT, well, you put a next Ethernet switch in, and our switches start at around $500. So yeah, well, it's not a huge investment. I think, yeah,
100%.
that's definitely scaling up, scaling out with AV over IP is a breeze, right? No switcher can win from that.
Absolutely. And it's much cheaper to run a Cat6 cable rather than running an HDMI cable over fiber, for example, or running a 50-meter HDMI extender.
Yep. Yeah, I think that is so logical that you will see these applications quickly move to AV over IP. I mean,
Yeah,
anything you cannot resolve with a one-to-one HDMI solution is going to be IP based. I think that's a fair thing to say.
correct. Correct. So let me make an announcement here that we're taking the strategic partnership with Netgear to the next phase, and we will be stocking Netgear switches in our warehouses in the Netherlands. So we will be able to ship our AV over IP NHD solutions along with the Netgear switches as a one-stop shop package solution ready to operate and deploy out of the box.
Yeah, this is great. Great news for integrators. They can buy anything they need for AV over IP at one address, and they also are guaranteed that it will work together, right? So two manufacturers that join hands will commonly support this implementation. So you never have to worry that it's not going to work because we will guarantee that you have a winning combination at hand.
100%. And all the encoders and decoders can just be patched to the Ethernet network, connect the controller, and you will see all the NHD equipment on the same network ready to be routed and configured with our easy to use wizard, right, Zach?
Yeah, exactly. So once you get all your equipment from WyreStorm, so we are, as Hatem said, we are going to supply Netgear directly from WyreStorm warehouses. Once you get your equipment, you just connect, plug and play system, follow the 7-step wizard to name your endpoints, give them the IP address. That's basically it is anybody can do it. So as Richard mentioned in this podcast, we are going in the same direction of making life easier for our consumers and our customers so they can install it and enjoy in really good AV over IP technology.
100%. Okay, so with that being said, thank you so much, Richard, for taking the time to be with us today on this episode of Forecasting AV. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we'll see you guys next month.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, guys.